Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I've got a few things in mind to talk about. We'll see how far I get with it. I want to start. I'm going to read. This is not quite the closing page of a novel that my wife and I just finished last night. There's an epilogue that follows it. I don't think you need too much background, but the name of the novel is called American Dervish, and it's the story of a situation that happens in a Muslim family, a family from Pakistan, and the boy who is important in what I'm going to read is at this point, I think he's a sophomore in college. But a lot of the main stuff that happened in the book was when he was about 12 years old. And the situation happened between he and his aunt, who had come from Pakistan to live with them after she had some dramatic things happen in her life. Most of that isn't that important. But I guess you should know she's lying in a hospital bed dying of cancer. And they're referring to the main plot line that happened in the book. It's not all that important from what I want to talk about, but I thought it'd be helpful to know. So, preface it, he says, "Then I don't understand." She says, "Faith has never been about an afterlife for me. It's about finding God now, in the everyday, here, with you, whether I'm living in a prison or in a castle, sick or healthy, it's all the same. That's what the Sufis teach. What comes our way, whatever it is, that is the vehicle. Every single life, no matter how big or small, how happy or sad, it can be a path to Him," in capital letters, of course. Now this is in italics. He's thinking, what are all these Sufi tales, I thought, but fictions she's using to shed a redeeming glow on a life scored with pain I caused her, pain her second husband caused her, and that she should have sought not to simply bear, but to escape. She could tell I didn't agree. She wanted me to speak my mind. So I did. I made my point with all the force I could muster. Humiliation, I told her, was not a vehicle to anything but senseless injury. And to say otherwise was to let a world filled with pain go its own way, unchecked, unredeemed. As I spoke, I had the distinct feeling that she was relishing every moment of what was happening. The discussion, my turmoil and passion, the apple juice she was slowly sipping. I finally put the question to her as directly as I could. What did the suffering she had gone through over the past 8 years at her husband's hands, and for that matter, the suffering she was experiencing now as she lay dying, what did any of this have to do with finding God? I should have expected she would reply with another anecdote pulled from her dervish's life. When Chishti was dying, she began, he was in pain all over his body. His followers didn't understand how a man who Allah loved so much could be put through so much pain. Do you know what he told them when they asked him why Allah was making him suffering so? What? This is in italics. This is how the divine is choosing to express himself through me. Her eyes glistened with eagerness to make the point that was, I would later come to see, something like the boiled down essence of her life. What he meant is that everything is an expression of Allah's will. It is all His glory. Even the pain, she paused. That is the real truth about life. So, my wife and I have been reading this book out loud. These books take a long time to get through. Probably it's about 3 months or so since we started the book. And after we finished that page, we started talking a little bit about it. And we both said, we remarked, well, that's not that different than what Buddhism says. Except, there's no Allah. There's no God's will doing it. So then we wondered, well, what is it in Buddhism? What does Buddhism have to say? What does it? And the closest we could come up with was cause and effect, circumstance. And if you substitute Buddha nature for Allah, it really works just as well. Except Buddha nature doesn't want anything for you. In a sense, there's no, I guess in a God religion, there's God's will. So she's saying, this is how the divine is choosing to express himself through me. It's an expression of Allah's will. Well, in Buddhism and in Zen, there's no will. There's no Buddha's nature's will. It's just the manifestation of cause and effect. But just as she's saying, in our tradition, everything is the manifestation of that Buddha nature. A big life or a small life. A prison or a castle. Wherever we are in that moment, how do we express our nature? And maybe we don't understand the cause and effect of things. But if we can bring awareness to the moment, it is actually possible to perceive cause and effect. But whether we perceive it or not, the point is to meet the moment and express ourselves. If we're in the prison, right in that moment, how do we express ourselves? I've told this story before. Many of you have heard it. But there was a time when Zen Master Bon Soeng was giving a talk, and one of his students said to him, he said, "When you die, Zen Master, I want to follow you. Wherever you go, I want to go with you." And he smiled and he looked at me and said, "No, you don't." He said, "Of course I do." He said, "No, you don't. When I die," he said, "I'm going straight to hell." So, "But Zen Master, you've been helping people your whole life. Why go to hell?" And he said, "That's where I'm needed most. That's the Bodhisattva ideal. That's not about God. That's not about some consciousness's will that's outside of us, manifesting and directing us. That's our life. That's the response to cause and effect. It's not very different. But it's not God's responsibility. It's my responsibility. I make my life. You make your life. When we're not clear, we think of our lives as dominated by other people's stuff. She made me do that. He was doing this to me, so what choice do I have? I have to do this. But that's a confused life. If we turn that around and take responsibility for the moment we're in, then we make our choice. Because no matter what you're doing to me, in this moment, I choose. I can kiss you, or I can punch you. It might sound like I'm preferring the kissing to the punching. And maybe in some ways I am, but that's just my making something. In the moment that you're in, you have to discern, what do I do? And then we make our choice. And that choice becomes the next. That choice informs our action. The result of that action becomes the next cause. And there we are. Our choice makes our life. So much of our practice is about having what we call a clear mind. To be able to see clearly enough, hear clearly enough, understand clearly enough, to be able to know what to do. And that's what practice is about, simply put. It's finding clarity. If you believe in God, you might be able to say, practice is about opening up the channel so God can act clearly through me. And you know what? That would be a fine way to practice. In Zen, we don't care that much what you think. And in Buddhism, we don't deal with God. We kind of sidestep it. It really is atheistic. It's not about that. One can have a firm, strong, solid belief in God. And we've had people practicing with us who are Protestant ministers, Catholic priests. I don't know that we've had a Jewish rabbi here in this group, but I know in our tradition there are plenty of rabbis who practice with us. There have been Muslims who practice with us. It's no problem. It doesn't matter. If that's your sense, then become clear. Open up so that the universe can manifest through you. One way or another, we're trying to get our small self enough out of the way that our essence, our Buddha nature, whatever you want to call it, can manifest in the moment. So now I don't know if I'll read the whole koan, but it's an important story. It's a very important koan in the Zen tradition. And it is called Pa Chong's Fox. And it very much has to do with what we're talking about. I think I'll just take the time and read it. It's only a page. Pa Chong's Fox. Whenever Master Pa Chong gave a Dharma talk, an old layman would come to listen and would leave with the monks when the talk was finished. One day he remained behind, and the master asked him, "Who are you?" "I am not a human being," the old man replied. "In the distant past, in the time of Mahakashyapa, who was Buddha's successor, I was the master of this mountain, and I made a great mistake. A monk once asked me, 'Is an enlightened person subject to samsara, the wheel of cause and effect?' That's what we're talking about here. I replied, 'No, an enlightened person is not subject to cause and effect.' Because of this answer, I was reborn a fox for 500 generations. Now please, Master, give me one sentence to liberate me from the fox's body. Is an enlightened person subject to samsara, the wheel of cause and effect?" Samsara is human confusion and suffering. So, Pa Chong responded, "Cause and effect are clear." Upon hearing these words, the old man got enlightenment, and bowing said, "I am already liberated from my fox's body, which can be found in a cave on the other side of this mountain. Would you please bury it as you would a dead monk?" The master then had the temple director strike the gavel and announce that there would be a funeral for a dead monk after the midday meal. The monks wondered aloud, what does this mean? Everyone is healthy, and no one is in the hospital. What's going on? After lunch, Master Pa Chong led them to a cave behind the mountain, picked out the dead fox with his staff, and had it ceremonially cremated. In the evening, Pa Chong told the whole story. Huang Bok immediately asked, this old man made one word mistake and was reborn a fox for 500 generations. Suppose he had not made a mistake. What would have happened then? Come here and I'll tell you. Huang Bok then walked up to Pa Chong and slapped him. The master clapped his hands, laughed, and said, I thought that the barbarian had a red beard. Now I see that the barbarian's beard is red. That's a reference to Bodhidharma, who brought Zen from India to China. Cause and effect are clear. Those are nice words, but how do you find that clarity in your own life? How do you find the clarity to perceive where things arise from and where they're going? And from that place, determining how to act. So, the old man who was a fox, his mistake was expressing this idea that when I'm free from cause and effect. Doesn't matter. Just about all over the world, we look at the results of people who live as if they're free from cause and effect. The first successor to Trungpa Rinpoche had AIDS. And he decided that as a free person, he wasn't subject to cause and effect. And hundreds of kids got AIDS because he thought he was free. And you can see that in the Buddhist world, you see it in the Christian world, you see it in universities, you see it in politics, you see it in every office around the country, probably around the world. It's this fantasy that I'm free, so I can do anything I want. That's actually only half a fantasy. We are free, and we can do what we want. But the other half is we take responsibility for our actions, and our eyes and our minds and our hearts and our spirits are clear enough that our actions reflect that clarity. We know that you and I are not two. So what I do impacts you, it impacts me. We're all in this together. And that clarity helps us see where the things are arising from and where they're going, so that when we act, we can be in harmony rather than in dissonance with the universe. So I have one more thing I want to read. Actually, I hadn't read through the whole koan before talking, but it ties in really well. Some of you might have seen this. Probably most people didn't bother to read it. But you know that, 3-4 weeks ago now, Zen Master Bon, one of the senior teachers in our Zen community, died very suddenly. And they translated the funeral ceremony. And when I read it, the imagery really struck me. Some of it is, well, I could have lots of opinions about it. But I think I'll just read some of it, because I think the imagery speaks very well in a kind of flowery way, in a way that we don't usually speak about it, but it points to what we're doing here. So this is the ceremony to move the coffin. Now listen to me, Wu Bang Sun Sa's enlightened spirit. Wonderful enlightenment is in front of you. The light of samadhi is feeding you. South, north, east, west. Everywhere you go, you are so happy. Even though everything is like this, I dare to ask everyone gathered, where is the starting point of the way to nirvana, of Wubang De Sansa's enlightened spirit? Every green willow tree is good to tie the reins of the horse to. Every road from every house leads to the capital city. It's just what I'm talking about. Every road from every house. We all like one house, and we prefer to have that house rather than the other house. But from every house, the road to the capital is right there. So now this is called To Prepare the Fire. Now listen to me, Wubang Sansa's enlightened spirit. This fire is not of three poisons. Three poisons are greed, anger, and ignorance, the basic ingredients of suffering in the Buddhist sense. This fire is not of three poisons, but it is the fire of the Buddha's samadhi, the fire of the supreme samadhi. Its light is so brilliant that it reflects the past, present, and the future. Its flame is so alive that it pierces through 10 directions. If you attain this light, you become like all Buddhas in one moment. You don't have to wait till you die for that. If you attain the light, you become like all Buddhas in one moment. If you lose the light, you will follow the stream of life and death for 10,000 kalpas. Wubang De Sansa's enlightened spirit, turn towards the light and reflect yourself, and then you will abruptly realize that there is nothing to be born, and then you will leave all delusions and sufferings, and you will attain the happiness of Buddha when he went into parinirvana. To start the fire. Now listen to me, Wubang Sansa's enlightened spirit. When the three causes get together, the body comes to existence for a moment. When the four elements are scattered, and it abruptly gets back to emptiness. And then four elements are scattered, and it abruptly gets back to emptiness. For how many years you floated in the sea of delusions. This morning you are out of it. It is joyful and blissful, but it is not yet complete. You who gathered here, answer me, where Wubang Sansa's enlightened spirit is going to. He is riding the wooden horse, but facing its tail. He flipped over once, and at that time, from the huge red flame comes out a cold wind. One more short section. To say goodbye. Sincerely, we do cremation following the Dharma. As Wubang Sansa's enlightened spirit goes into nirvana, according to causes, we committed to the fire of the body that wandered around for 100 years, and he is getting to the gate of nirvana without hesitation. I wish Wubang Sansa's enlightened spirit will be assisted by our help on the way to nirvana. And then there's a little more chanting. That's true in death, and that's true in life. I was hit pretty hard by Wubang's death. We were friends, but we were kind of casual friends. I've probably known him for, probably 35 years. But we weren't that close. He lived on the East Coast, I lived on the West Coast, and then probably 15 years ago, maybe more, he moved to Europe. and did a lot of the work to establish our Zen centers in Europe. And after Zen Master Bon Soeng died, he picked up the task of helping to form the Sangha in Europe. But he died very suddenly. He was probably about 3 years older than me. Just like that. In the morning, they were doing a one-day sitting. He didn't feel very well, so he went to lie down, and he never got up. None of us know when that moment will come. We all like to feel and believe it's somewhere out in the distance. And probably for just about all of us, it is. But not for all of us. And each one of us knows somebody who's probably a lot closer, we think, to that moment of death. So, all of us live a finite existence. Do we orient towards the light? Do we take that light, bring our consciousness to the light, and use this energy to help? Or do we stay stuck in the three poisons, greed, anger, and ignorance, and grab as much as we can for ourselves, even if we're not materialistic? Maybe it's happiness. Maybe there's something that we love so much that we get greedy. Something that we feel like we need so much. If we're honest, we think when I say that, oh, I should be rid of greed. I shouldn't do it. That might be nice, but I wouldn't count on it. Better yet, notice it. Cop to it. See it as it arises. Make friends with it. Become familiar with it. The worst thing we can do is reject it. The worst thing we can do is have this idea that we're supposed to be something, and then everything that doesn't fit that thing we think we're supposed to be, we just push away. And then we pretend that we're this thing. But we're not a thing. We're not an object. We're beings. So make friends with all of it. And if we can make friends with all of it, there's a possibility that we can become clear and manifest clearly. But if we reject the parts we don't like and pretend they're not there, then we're stuck in this box of being an object. And our lives will not be clear, and we are pretty much guaranteed to just continue that wheel of samsara turning. But every moment we have a chance. Every moment we have a choice. What am I doing right now? That's the Buddha way. And we practice to be alive right now with enough clarity and enough compassion and enough wisdom that we can bring that light right into our everyday life, whether it's in a castle or a prison. Whether we have everything we want or we don't have everything we want. If we think we're a shitty person or we think we're a great person. That's just our thinking. Cut through our thinking means accept everything. Allow everything to exist. And find the clarity, wisdom, and compassion to manifest truth in this moment. And everything we do here at the Zen Center is about that. It may look strange to some, it may look formal, or some who practice in other traditions may say it's not quite formal enough. Some people like gray robes, some people think these gray robes are ridiculous. Some people love our chanting, some people hate our chanting. That's all our thinking. And I can experience every one of those thoughts at one point or another, maybe in the last hour. But that's just thinking. If we don't succumb to our thinking, if we don't get locked in, we can find some freedom. And in that freedom, there's some space for that light to shine through. And as I say, that's what we do here. that's the orientation we have, and we make our best effort. That's all that's asked for. We don't ask for perfection. We don't have a theology that you have to buy into. Just sit down, take a good look, and open, and try to pass that along to the suffering world. Questions? Comment? Anything anybody wants to talk about? Karen?
I think I understand a lot of what you're saying, where the resistance that kept coming up in me as you talk, I call it punctuation. Where do we start?
Right here.
But we're born as babies.
Mm-hmm.
And some of us are born into horrendous situations.
Mm-hmm.
And some of us are born into comfortable situations.
A castle or a prison.
And both of those can be oppressive.
Mm-hmm.
The Buddha found the castle oppressive.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked before that reincarnation makes sense to me. And it makes sense to me in this context because I met a former colleague on the trail today. I hadn't seen her in years. And she told me her husband has ALS. It's just a few more months.
Mm-hmm.
And she was able to be walking because the caretaker was there taking care of him.
Mm-hmm.
She always struck me as a good woman. I assume her husband is a good man.
Mm-hmm.
ALS is a curse that comes out of genetics or something.
I don't think they really know, but something.
I think of Darlene Cohen, who was a Zen Buddhist priest in the Soto tradition, who had arthritis from the youngest age and was in constant pain all the time, and used meditation as the only way to stay sane in the pain. A lot of people who have that pain are just burning in hell with the pain. There's cause and effect. How I respond to the pain in my life is going to affect what happens next. If I lie in bed and bitch and whine, or I sit on the cushion and practice and teach, they're two completely different causes with two completely different effects.
Maybe.
Well, I'm thinking about Darlene Cohen in particular.
Yes.
And she said, even at the end, if I could have had a choice,
Yeah.
I would have chosen a life without this pain.
Right.
And yet I know there are many people who adored her.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a whole sangha of people who lived in pain, who were so thankful to have a teacher who set an example of living with it. So what I'm trying to say is, it makes sense to me that if we have had certain circumstances in previous lives, then when we get born into the hell or the prison or the castle, it's what we bring in with us that becomes there's cause and past existence that affects not what I'm born into, but how I meet what I'm born.
I mean, I think karma would say both. If you're really strictly talking about reincarnation, it would be both. Both how you deal with it, but also the causes of what you're born into.
Right. But if you don't believe in reincarnation, how does Darlene Cohen come to Zen? How... Do you see what I'm trying to say?
I think I do. And I have no desire to dissuade you from your belief, but it's just a belief. It's a way that you can speak about it to understand it, and it makes sense to you. And maybe you're right, I don't know. In a way, though, it doesn't matter. Because here we are. Do you lie in bed and whine, or do you get up and sit on the pillow? Some people don't have the energy or the inclination to get up and sit on the pillow. Some people find relief in other ways. Darlene found it in sitting. Those who are drawn to that kind of practice, if they're fortunate, they find that kind of relief.
That's the clue. If they're fortunate. What?
Yeah, I know. You like that one, but that's the one that's the word I wish I didn't use.
What causes good fortune?
Don't know. Stay with don't know.
With respect to reincarnation and such, I have found it useful to think of it as metaphorical in the following sense. A single life consists of countless lifetimes. You are not who you were when you were 5 years old whatsoever. And it's still very different from when you were 15, very different from when you were or will be 30. And in this way, a single life consists of countless lifetimes. Every second you are reborn as a different person. Your body itself, I have read somewhere that something like 90% of the matter in your body at age 30 is different from at age 20 or something, because everything is constantly cycling through. So in this way, reincarnation is highly amenable to reinterpretation within a single lifetime.
That's a good way to look at it. We don't know. I mean, actually, what you're saying is actually just fact.
Is it?
That every moment is a new moment. But again, remember, from the Buddhist perspective, everything comes out of conditions. So even if you say it's a new body, it's still within the framework of the body that was before it. It's not completely a new entity. In one sense, I know you can say it is, but in another sense, its conditions are growing out of the same genetic material that was there previously. It has the same markers, genetic markers, that those cells at birth had. So it's different, but it's also the same. That's the conundrum, and that's the duality. Yeah, please.
Well, it's change. It's just change, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's part of the wheel. If you want to be imaginative about it, so change is happening all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, the center is always there, but the change is still simultaneous with the center,
Mm-hmm.
which would be I guess in this case, maybe original, quote-unquote, genetic material, but everything's happening around it.
In our tradition, we'd say, before thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Before you make it something, then you're closer to that center.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in one sense, the universe is just manifesting. And, you know, from one perspective, we're each individual. We're all, probably all of us, with maybe a couple of exceptions, are going to go home to a different house. So I'm individually going to go here, you're individually going to go there. Right in this moment, we're all together. So we're part of the group and we're individual. That's all names. Right now, this is the manifestation. Before thinking, it's already appearing. After thinking, we get confused and lost, and we can argue about reincarnation or good and bad, right and wrong, because once we bring our thinking into it, we enter the relative world. Zen Master Bon Soeng used to teach, before thinking, your mind, my mind, same mind. After thinking, your mind, my mind, different mind. Before thinking, there's no problem. After thinking, we create wars and mine and yours. So, it's not that thinking is bad and we should get rid of it. We just need to include the perspective of before thinking. And that's a lot of what we're doing in meditation, even though there's a lot of thinking that goes on while we're meditating. But we're watching it. We're somehow a step removed. And we can taste sometimes that before thinking.
So a comment and a question. You were talking about Allah and God theology. There's a branch of Christian theology called process theology, which basically says everything, even God, is a process. So that just made me think of the cause and effect stuff.
How could God be process?
I haven't read enough process theology.
I mean, in a way, that suits my theology just fine. But
yeah,
it's interesting.
It was a reaction to the question of, well, it was a post-World War II reaction to how could a good, loving God let something like the Holocaust happen.
Yeah.
As far as what you were just talking about, thinking and sitting, sometimes I find there's a very fine line between letting something arise and observing it and letting it go, and pushing it away. And I just am wondering if you have any suggestions about trying to find a way to walk that line.
My main suggestion is keep going to the line. Work it out. The worst thing to do is to avoid it. Then it just stays there in confusion. Keep going to it. Keep stepping right up to it and find out. And then give a Dharma talk and talk about it. Yes?
So you were talking about greed, not just greed for money or power or anything like that. It can be greed for things that you really love.
Greed for
really
things
love,
you really love, yeah.
Right? And I mean, sometimes the things that you really love could also mean things that perhaps are good for the world, but maybe are not. I don't know. So, what do you do with that greed? What do you do with that greed?
Struggle with it. Face it. Embrace it. Make friends with it. And really, really bring your clarity to it. And then see what happens. But, I mean, there are some traditions that would say, cut it out. If you could do that, you would. More likely, you have to struggle with it. But the struggle is the practice. That's all we can do. Sometimes there are things, Leah gave a talk a few weeks ago, and the phrase she was using, I can't, but I have to. And we all get into that place. It feels like we can't, but there's another part of us that knows we have to. So all we can do is struggle with it. Go toward it rather than away from it. And look deeply. Sometimes you can just wonder, what am I grasping for? If it's this thing, what is the thing? And I don't mean to say, okay, the thing is this, but how does it play in your life? Very often it's a substitute for something else. So go deep. Struggle with it. Wonder about it. Be curious. And, so much of our practice is getting stability down here. And it's from that place we can hold it. If our energy moves upward or gets stuck here or we're avoiding, we can't hold it. We can't stay put. But with some stability in our center, we can face it. So some of the work we do is just learning how to stay put so that we can work with the material and the energy that we have to struggle with. So you had something?
A question. One teaching that I hear from Buddhist teachers, including Zen teachers, including in this school, is this teaching that comes up over and over again, that you cannot find fulfillment, you cannot find happiness in things that are outside of you or things in external life. So why would Buddhist teachers say that, and what does that mean?
I hope I don't say that. I mean, again, there's truth to what you say, but I can't tell you where you're going to find happiness. I can tell you my experiences chasing after things might lead you to a dead end, but you have to find that for yourself. So, I'm not sure what to say about that. I mean, there are things that I like. There's foods that I like. People who sit retreats with us know that I like to have a little ice cream before I go to bed. And sometimes maybe I get a little grumpy if there's no ice cream or if somebody else ate it up. But I gotta work with that. And the clarity, again, it's not cutting everything off. It's working with the energy. It's experiencing it and work with the experience itself. So don't follow the teaching that tells you something. Follow the teaching that says, go into it and experience it, and then you decide. And just like I said to Ben, then come up here and give a Dharma talk about it. But not just about, oh, I found this and now everything's great. Talk about the struggle. Talk about the dead ends that you hit. Talk about the way you had to dig deep to stay with it long enough to find something out. The whole experience. We're not just about the pretty result. If you're just about the pretty result, you can't help anybody else. It's got to be embodied in the nitty-grittiness of this magnificence that we live in. You know, I want to be careful because I don't at all mean to paint a bleak, negative picture. This is an amazing thing that we're alive. It's amazing that we're all sitting here right now. And a lot of our fears, anxieties, greed, confusion get in the way of just being able to settle into that magnificence. But you got to work with all of it. That's the way it becomes magnificent. It's not like, oh, this is the pretty, clean, beautiful thing that I want to be and get rid of everything else. It's what that woman in the novel was saying. It's the castle or the prison. If you're in the prison, then do your work in prison. Each one of us has a community that we are part of, separate from the Zen Center. Bring it back there. Work right there. Zen Master Bon Soeng, I remember he once said, if you're a drug addict or a recovering drug addict, work with the people you're with. They need you. Somebody came to me once and she wanted to do an internship with me, and I couldn't take her, but I was really tempted because she was a recovering addict and she was working with other recovering addicts. And I said, how great. That's where the work's needed. That's not my community, perhaps, so I'm not going to do it. But if you train, you can do it. So whatever your suffering is, that leads you to where you need to go to do the work you need to do to help this world. Each one of us has our own particularity. Use that particularity to help wherever you are. We don't have to reject